It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and good morning. It is Sunday, so that means it is time for a Locked On NFL Sunday. You've got myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, joined, as always, by my fantastic co-host, Cody Roark, at Cody Roark NFL on Twitter. You can catch Cody every Monday through Friday over on Locked On Broncos and myself on Locked On Saints. Thank you very much for joining us for another Locked On NFL Sunday live show as we continue to go through all the biggest stories throughout the week. Took last week off, coming back around this week. And before we get started, Cody, just want to say to everybody out there, the fathers, the mothers doing it on their own like my mom did, happy Father's Day to everybody for being here. And thank you very much for being here with us on another edition of Locked On NFL Sunday. Cody, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, my man. Look, this is probably the rough time of the offseason that we're actually entering here, because last week, teams were wrapping up mandatory mini camp, and then they're going to get a couple weeks off, but it's going to lead us right into NFL training camp at the end of July. So football, it's close, Ross, and I think fans are very excited about it. I know I personally am very excited about it. So, man, we're getting one step closer. Yeah,
absolutely. It's you go through the offseason and you just kind of go piece by piece trying to get to training camp. We get the universal reporting date for the first time in NFL history on July 27th, though there will be a few teams that get to start early, those that are performing in participating in the Hall of Fame game, the early Thursday night game that opens up the NFL season, all of that. But for the most part, what you're looking at is July 27th for the target date. So we're going to talk a little bit about the transition from mini camp to training camp, some of the bigger stories from around mini camp, and we're also going to be joined by a bunch of our friends here on today's episode. Other local experts here with the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll have Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants coming in to talk a bit about some great Father's Day stories from the Giants. Patricia as plugged in as anyone when it comes to the Giants organization and the players. We're also going to talk to her about her great interview earlier on in the week with Brian Baldinger of NFL.com, or NFL Network rather, where they talked a bit about the offensive line and other pieces. And then we'll also welcome in Corbin Smith, who's going to give us an update on the Seahawks, and then Brack and Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals talk a bit about Kyler and the Cards. But first, as always, want to remind you to go and check out at Locked On Network so that you're following up with everything going on across the world of sports. Check out the Locked On Today podcast as well. So, Cody, when it comes down to the transition from mini camp to training camp, this time off, this is an important time for players as they begin to shift. What are some of the things that you might see players doing during this sort of off period for those of us in media? But it certainly is a busy time for the players.
Yeah, well, you're going to see a combination of things. Maybe for the first week, you might see players take a little bit of a break, not do anything, maybe go on a trip or something like that. Just because from this point forward, once they report for training camp, it is 110% football. They're not going to be 100% in terms of physicality and health. So it's going to be a long year. It's going to be a long grind for them. So take a week off, and then they're going to come back. Maybe in that second or third week, players are going to get together to throw the football around. But you also have to be mindful, too. They're not going to be reckless. Obviously, you don't want to suffer an injury right before training camp starts. So they're going to be, easing their way in. And obviously players, organizations, they've had their own people tell them, hey, whatever you do, don't overdo it, because we want you bright and healthy for the start of training camp at the end of July. So you're going to see a combination of workouts, but nothing too serious at this point for players.
Yeah, absolutely. And now when it comes down to wrapping up minicamp, some teams did some special things like the Denver Broncos. What did the Denver Broncos have going on to close out minicamp this year?
Oh, it was really cool. So the Broncos have been working really hard in OTAs. They've had really good attendance. I mean, I think they only had maybe 2 or 3 players that, didn't show up until things became mandatory. So they had everybody else at the team facility. So what they did, Vic Fangio surprised players on Thursday. Instead of holding a practice, they held a field day, which is a great opportunity to build team chemistry, team bonding. I mean, there was a tug of war, there was 3-point shootout, home run derby, there was the dunk tank where George Payton got to sit on it, and players had to throw a ball and try to dunk him into the water, which he did several times. And they also brought a snow cone machine, Ross. And if anybody knows, in Colorado, it was 106 degrees this week. And when you're on a field outside, especially at elevation, it's even hotter. So a great opportunity for the Broncos to be able to bond a little bit. But here's the deal, too, because there's people that were like, oh, why is a 5-11 football team from last year, why are they taking a day off from practice? Well, here's the deal, folks. You can't choose to be miserable about everything as it comes to being a fan. Like, this is an important thing. And, Ross, you know this probably as well as I do, being a former player. you have to have strong team chemistry. You want to be able to bond with your teammates. You want to be able to bond with your coaches and get that buy-in. If you don't have that, you're not going to do anything. We've seen the best teams in the NFL not have that buy-in. It comes back to bite them in the end of the postseason. And I think that's something that people don't really talk about too much. But even that, more importantly, I think the frustration that many people have with practice, people don't understand the rules of the NFL, the PA and the CBA and everything like that. Mandatory minicamp, you could have two full speed, essentially. There's no contact. Full speed, though. Full speed practices. One of those practices was designated to be a walkthrough. And the Broncos on Tuesday and Wednesday, they went full speed. Obviously, no contact. So Thursday would have been a walkthrough practice anyway. So you know what? Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's have some team bonding. I love it. We've also seen some other teams like the Indianapolis Colts. They had the knockout game with Carson Wentz.
That's right. Yeah,
and that was fun to be able to watch that. It brings me back to my my days in the gym, my friend. But that's the important thing about sports. It's more than just football. It's more about X's and O's. You want to reward players for their hard work.
Absolutely. And look, as somebody that's been covering the New Orleans Saints for years now, I mean, you see that with the Saints all the time as a team that focuses very much on buy-in and culture. And you see that with some of the most successful teams from around the NFL. Just like you mentioned, you have a very talented team, but if there's no chemistry there, if there's no buy-in to the system, if there's no culture for the team and there's a lack of identity, then that team's probably going to struggle. If not throughout the regular season, when it gets to the biggest moments, that's when they tend to fall apart. Brooklyn Nets, excuse me. Sorry. That just kinda came out. But, when I'm looking at, looking at the NFL, you could see a lot of different, ways that they've gone about that. The New Orleans Saints ended up doing their mini camp basically a week early and then didn't do mini camp during the actual week that was designated for mini camp. So they got it out of the way a little bit early. During this week, what you've seen instead is they continued to film the Sean Payton Bountygate season movie that stars Kevin James. For some reason, they were filming that at the Saints facility. Sean Payton went and got married on Friday. He and his then fiance, now wife Skylene, got married in Cabo on Friday. So you have to imagine that they left earlier on in the week as well. And then you have another wedding this weekend for defensive line coach and assistant head coach Ryan Nielsen. So you have all of these events, all of these moments, all these things that are happening during that time that are still beneficial towards making sure that folks are happy away from the facility and then enjoy coming back to the facility when it's time to do so. And that shouldn't really be any surprise, knowing that the New Orleans Saints last year were the first team to say, go away during offseason training activities, come back healthy and ready to get started for training camp. And then you see them taking not the same approach, but at least having a similar approach in terms of not being overly stringent around the OTA and minicamp process.
Absolutely. Well, can we first talk about the fact that somebody actually sat in a production meeting and said, hey, we're going to have Kevin James star as Sean Payton, and we're going to touch on Bountygate. I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't understand. I don't see the optics of it. I don't see how Kevin James can really portray that. Sean Payton's a unique cat, man, but I don't know. The fact that somebody is like, hey, this is a great idea. I mean, it's a waste of money, in my opinion, but
we'll see. We'll see how the movie actually pans out. With it being, I think it's a Happy Madison production, or at least it has Happy Madison
involvement.
Greg
Williams? Who's going to play Greg Williams? That's the question.
Listen, there's a question I've not asked yet. Hey, ain't nobody worried about Gregaga out here at this moment, but we'll see how it all pans out as it comes to it. But yes, it's an interesting situation, but it's something that's now a part of the New Orleans market, and we'll see how it all ends up actually shaking out once the film actually drops. So let's get to some great conversation here with our good friend Patricia Traina of the Locked On Giants podcast. You can follow her on Twitter at Patricia_Traina. You'll see the Twitter account here at the bottom here in just a sec. Patricia, thanks so much for taking the time to join us and for being here with us on today's episode of Locked On NFL Sunday.
What's good, guys? Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure to see you. So I want to start off here, talk a little bit about the fantastic interview that you had with Brian Baldinger of NFL Network. He also works with our Odyssey partners as well. You guys got into some really great conversation around the offensive line and more. What was that conversation like? What were some of the big takeaways that you had from it?
Well, Baldy is great. Baldy, of course, does Baldy's breakdowns. And if you're not following him on Twitter, that is a must-see during the season. He does a terrific job breaking all that stuff down and puts it in language that you can understand. So whether you're a beginning football fan, a new football fan, or an experienced one, you will understand what he's talking about. Brian is local to the area. So I believe he's based out of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is South Jersey, closer to the Philly area. So he was at Jets camp when I actually spoke with him. He had just finished up with Jets camp and was in his car. And God bless him. He said, look, I'm stuck in traffic. He says, as long as you need me, I'm here. And we had a wonderful conversation about the Giants offensive line. I asked him about, the fact that they didn't really upgrade the unit. They added a couple pieces, but, no major upgrades. I asked him about the struggles last year. I asked him about each individual player, Will Hernandez, Andrew Thomas, Nick Gates, and we went down the line and he gave me his take on based on what he's seen. Baldy does a lot of great film study. So when he tells you something, you know that he has done his homework, and just a really, really good interview. And then, not to mention a really super nice guy. He told me he was going to be at Giant Camp one day this summer. He says, we got to get together, maybe watch a little practice. He talked about, hey, if you ever need me, here's my phone number, so he could not have been nicer, and really, really, for me, a nice surprise, because when I had requested somebody from the NFL Network, I thought I was going to get, Sean O'Hara, which I would have been happy with because I know Sean, having covered him. But when they said Brian Baldinger, I'm like, okay, cool. That's somebody I've never spoken with. So great conversation with him.
Love that. I mean, one of the things too, with Baldy's breakdowns, especially when you take a look at the offensive line, he really, I like what what he does there in terms of being able to teach somebody who has maybe a basic level of understanding of the game, as you mentioned, and helping them amplify that a little bit more. But one of the questions I have for you, Patricia, as it pertains to the Giants on the offensive line, I mean, what are the expectations for that unit this year? I mean, they are getting Saquon back behind them. Daniel Jones a little bit more comfortable right now as a starter and some receiving threats around him. How much of the focus for the offensive success this year is going to really be predicated off the O-line for the Giants?
Oh, big time. Big time. Because like I said, that's the unit that they added Zach Fulton, basically swapping out Kevin Zeitler for Zach Fulton, which to me is not an upgrade. It's kind of a downgrade given how Fulton struggled last year with the Texans. But yeah, that line, they are counting on the fact that line mostly has a year of experience under their belts playing together. They are counting on the fact that they have brought in new coaching resources. They have Rob Sale, who they hired as their offensive line coach. They brought in Pat Flaherty, who was Tom Coughlin's offensive line coach, and put together that awesome offensive line. Prior to Coughlin coming in, the Giants offensive line, I remember, was a major, major weak link. And then they brought in Pat Flaherty and the new players, Sean O'Hara, Kareem McKenzie, Chris Snee, David Deal, Rich Seibert. And that line became a strength, not just for one season, but that line was a strength for a good 3 to 4 seasons under Pat Flaherty. So they're really pouring a lot of resources into that unit. They know it's an important unit because, look, if that unit doesn't perform, then it doesn't matter what receivers they brought in, what tight ends they brought in, who the quarterback is, who the running back is. It won't matter if that line doesn't do its job.
Yeah, and I think that's a strong point to make, too. I want to flip to the defensive side of the ball real quick because I had some Broncos fans that were asking me a little bit more about Isaac Yiadom, which, look, I've been following Isaac Yiadom since he came in as a Bronco. I thought when he stepped in for the Giants last year, thought he did a pretty good job. Any kind of word on maybe what his status might be coming into the season?
Yeah, Isaac Yiadom was pressed into the starting role. They traded for him, as you know. I think it was a 7th-round pick at the end of training camp last year. And basically, I think in retrospect, the Giants knew that Corey Ballantyne, who they had started the season with, just wasn't going to work out. Good kid, but just wasn't fit for that position. So they wanted Isaac Yiadom to hopefully work out. The problem with him, I think, is twofold. Number one, he did not have the off season. He did not have a training camp. So he had to kind of learn as he went along, which is tough, I mean, everybody says, at the end of the day, football is mano a mano, but you also have to learn the schemes. You have to learn, the concepts and how you fit in and how to cover for guys that if there's a breakdown and stuff. And Isaac didn't have that. That said, Isaac had his strengths. He was pretty decent in man coverage, which the Giants didn't play a whole lot of last year because they just didn't have the personnel to do. He had his struggles in zone coverage. So they basically were looking to add speed. They were looking to upgrade that defensive backfield. Now, what's interesting is Isaac Yiadom did accept a pay cut. I think he was on the final year of his rookie deal, and he took a pay cut. I forget how much it was, but it was significant to stay with the Giants, and they still think he can have a role on this team. It's just not going to be as a starter.
Yeah. That makes sense. Patricia, I got 2 questions here as we wrap up with you, and everybody, as you can see down at the bottom of the screen there, make sure you follow Patricia at Patricia_Traina on Twitter. And of course, you can catch every Monday through Friday over at the Locked On Giants podcast. Right now, 3 shows a week across most of the Locked On Podcast Network in the NFL and college side, but back to 5 shows a week as we get closer and closer to training camp getting started. But Patricia, I want to ask you 2 quick questions. We were talking about minicamp attendance. You covered minicamp for the Giants very closely. How was attendance when it came to minicamp for the Giants?
It wasn't bad. It was actually a little better than I thought it would be. It was, I would say, out of the 90-man roster that they had maybe 70 guys there. They were missing the defensive backfield because the defensive backs were out training in Florida with Logan Ryan. They missed guys here and there. Got some guys came in and then they went away and then they came back. And so, but I would say on the whole, it wasn't bad, the minicamp, the OTA coverage, the minicamp coverage itself, the mandatory minicamp, everybody was there, including the injured guys. So let me just clarify that right there.
Sure.
But it wasn't bad. And I like the structure Joe Judge, the head coach, put in place for that, because, a lot of times people are like, oh, who looked good, who didn't. And it really wasn't about competing. It wasn't so much about jogging for for depth spots on the depth chart. It was more about getting the fundamentals and just, getting back into football shape, because remember, they didn't have this last year. So the coaches now have a basic understanding, I think, of who can do what from a fundamental perspective. And now the next step is to apply that to specific roles in the offense and defense.
Gotcha. And you have a great interview coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Giants. It's Father's Day today, but you've got some good Father's Day stories, I imagine, coming right around the corner for Giants fans.
Yes, I have a wonderful interview coming tomorrow. I call him my favorite maniac, but I do so because he's a little offbeat. Ross, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
But no, it's a term of endearment, and he knows. I've called it to his face. But Steve Weatherford, the former punter of the New York Giants, is coming back to New Jersey later this month. He now has several side businesses that he's doing. One of which is called CEO of Your Life. So he's coming back to New Jersey, and he's having a 2-day seminar at the unofficial Giants team hotel where they used to stay. I think they still stay there, actually, before a home game. And so he talked a little bit about that, but more importantly, we talked about the 10th anniversary of the Giants Super Bowl 46 team, which is going to be celebrated this year. So he gave some scoops as to what is coming down the pipe, some stuff that Giant fans will probably want to hear, just events and stuff that they're talking about. And he also spoke about his new son. We talk about Father's Day. God bless his wife, 6 kids. She just had her 6th child, a 12-pound, 3-ounce baby boy who measured almost 2 feet long. I mean, this baby, I don't think you could call him a baby. I think you have to call him a little man. And this is Steve's second son. He has his first child is it's got to be a teenager now. I don't remember how old Ace is, but his first son is Ace, and he's a spitting image of his dad. And then Steve had a bunch of daughters, and now he has this son, Kingston Kraft. It's what they named the baby. And I saw a picture of him, and he is a big boy. Oh, my God.
Already an offensive lineman, huh?
Oh, my God. Yes. Definitely not a punter.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to it, Patricia, and we look forward to having you back on later on as we get closer and closer to training camp to talk a little bit more about this Giants team, which I still contend is a very interesting team and intriguing team heading into the 2021 year. Everybody, you can follow Patricia on Twitter at Patricia_Traina, and then check out the Locked On Giants podcast wherever you get your podcast. Patricia, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
See you soon.
Thanks, Patricia. That's 12 pounds.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about what else is 12 pounds. Like, that's what I was trying to think about. Like, comparatively, like, what else is 12 pounds?
I mean, not even a bag of potatoes is not even 12 pounds. And that's pretty heavy at times. Well, wow. Obviously, that's great. I mean, 6 kids, being able to, man. One of these days, Ross, one of these days, I'm going to have a kid. I think that's going to be, if anything, I want him to be a kicker. He can make a lot of money.
There you go.
Without taking all the hits. So if I ever had to, but
unless you have like a Pat McAfee style guy who's going to run and make some tackles,
You know what? That actually might be the perfect combination. You might get paid a lot of money to do that. But then again, if my son didn't want to play football, I'd support that. But
there you go.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know, Ross. Let's put it through the perspective too. Like for Father's Day, I'm not a father yet. I know you're not one yet, but I've always thought about this. I don't know if I could coach my kids' teams. I don't know.
No, I would not be able to coach my like if I had a son and he played and I had the opportunity to coach his team. No, not at all. Not at all. I would not be in the car. Yeah. And for that matter, if I was coaching like basketball or something like that and I had a daughter and then she was on that team, I couldn't coach that either. I would have to be a coach on a different team.
Yeah. No, I don't even think I could coach. I just think that for me, I'm too competitive, not in the sense that like we need to win, but it's like I feel like that's such a hard line because I've coached with coaches that have had their sons on teams, and it's always a hard line, I think, to separate being, dad and a coach. It's a really tough position to be in. But we see it in the NFL. I mean, Clint Kubiak is now taken over as the offensive coordinator for the Vikings for his dad, Gary, from last year. So I don't know, maybe it can pay off. But no, that's interesting stuff too. Obviously, the Broncos open up the season with the Giants. I'm looking forward to talking with Patricia leading up to that game. Obviously, once we get a little bit closer to September 12th, it's going to be fun, man. But the Giants are an underrated team, in my opinion. I don't feel like they've been talked about enough. I think the return of Saquon is going to be useful. I think defensively last year they weren't talked about enough.
So good
defensively. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, James Bradbury at one point was the top corner in the NFL.
Absolutely. And you got a great 11.5 sack season from Leonard Williams in a tight front defense too. On top of that, like it was a really talented defense for sure.
So I think the Giants will be one of those teams that's going to make some noise this year. Everyone's talking about, Fitz magic, but I think the Giants have a little bit more magic than, Fitz at the quarterback position at least.
Sure. Fitz magic, good TV. New York Giants, good team. And just for the sake, before we bring in our good friend Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks here, 12 pounds is about as heavy as a gallon of paint, but as heavy as a cat, and about 4/5 as heavy as a bowling ball, if that helps. But I think bowling balls vary in weight, so let's not use that one. Let's say 2/5 as heavy as a gold bar. We'll go with that one. So that's where you are when it comes down to 12 pounds. Anyway, let's get to our good friend Corbin Smith here of Locked On Seahawks. You can follow him on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL and hear him every Monday through Friday along with his co-host Rob Rang over at Locked On Seahawks. Corbin, how are you, brother?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Great, man. Good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. One of the biggest storylines that's sort of going through when it comes to the Seahawks right now, most recently, right? We can leave the Russell Wilson stuff off to the side for a moment, but now,
let's let that stuff die.
Yeah, let's just let that go. But one of the big conversations has been around Jamal Adams. It seems that Pete Carroll seems pretty confident that Jamal Adams will be there for training camp and that things will be okay. What have you heard, or what do you know so far about your sort of insight you can gather on Jamal Adams and the contract situation around him?
So based on past precedent, I would expect that Jamal Adams has a new contract within 2 or 3 days before the start of camp or the first couple of days of camp. That's going to be your 5-6 day window. The Seahawks have signed most of their extensions during that time. I fully anticipate that he is going to be extended during that window. They have to. I mean, even if there's any hesitancy, and I don't think there is, but if there was any hesitancy, it's like you just gave up 2 first-round picks for this player. You think he's going to be a superstar for your defense for years to come. So show him the money. Now, if he's wanting like Myles Garrett type money, they're not going to be showing him that kind of money. But they will pay him. I guarantee that it's going to be in that 17 million, maybe even 18 million range per year. Maybe it comes up a little lower than that, but that's generally what I've heard that he's looking for. He doesn't want to just break the safety record for contracts. He wants to obliterate it because he considers himself a defensive weapon. And he had 9.5 sacks in just 12 games last year. I can understand why he says that. So I expect there's going to be a deal done, though. And if I had to make a prediction, I think it happens right before the start of training camp. Maybe even after they report, they don't actually practice for a couple days. It might happen during that window.
That's interesting. I think for me, I think he's a hell of a player. But the question I have is, obviously, if I'm the Seahawks organization, I'm looking at some of his injury history. And I'm saying, do I really want to pay that much money for a damn good player, by the way? Absolutely. But, I mean, we've seen this trend happen before with teams that, paid for a player that, has had injury history there, here or there. And then all of a sudden they regret that contract. I mean, do you suspect that with Jamal Adams?
I get where you're coming from, and definitely last year he had 3 different injuries that impacted the season. He missed 4 games with a groin injury. He played through cracked fingers, which I think is the reason that he had 0 interceptions. He had his hands on the ball a couple times, but I'm thinking in the back of my mind, if I had half of my hand with cracked fingers, I'd probably be dropping the ball too.
Sure.
And then he had a shoulder injury that he played through in the wild card round against the Rams. They lost that game, and he had a couple huge missed tackles in that game because he was not 100% and he was playing with a issue in his shoulder that needed to be repaired. So he had multiple surgeries this offseason. So yes, that in the back of your mind is something that you are a little bit concerned about, but I think the Seahawks are also considering he's only 25 years old. And prior to last season, he had been pretty healthy. So I don't think the Seahawks are that concerned about that. And again, there's always going to be a risk when you're signing a guy to a second contract. Even guys that haven't had injuries, we know this game is extremely physical, and guys can start having injuries at any point. So I think that it would be a poor decision on their part, especially with what they've given up to acquire him. Yeah, maybe you could have something in the contract that helps you if there's some injuries that recur here in the next couple of years. But, I mean, they have no choice. I mean, they have to re-sign him, and he's just too good of a player not to bring back, too.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
I also want to throw it this way, too, because we saw the Seahawks defense really struggle last year, too. I mean, it was crazy, the offensive numbers that Russ was putting up, and the offense was, but then all of a sudden the defense, they struggled. They couldn't stop anybody. Obviously, losing Shaquille Griffin this offseason. What are your thoughts on the Seahawks defense as it stands right now, especially after mandatory minicamp leading up into training camp? Is there still concern about that defense heading into this season?
I think there's actually a lot of optimism, and it's not just positive Pete Carroll just spewing his optimism. I look at the front line that they have. They lost Jaron Reed, but I'm going to throw this name out there, and I promised myself I was not going to jump on the hype train because it always seems like it derails. But Robert Kimdiche has looked fantastic, as much as you can in OTAs and minicamp workouts.
Sure.
I mean, He's playing with enthusiasm. He's going 110% every single rep. And he didn't play last year. So I think he got a wake-up call. Like, this is my last chance. But he told the reporters, but this is the only chance I will need. So he's confident that he's going to be able to get the job done. But we know the talent is there. We know that Robert Kimdiche can be a game wrecker. It just didn't work out. And honestly, he was starting to figure it out before he tore his ACL 2 years ago. So he's fully healthy. He's in phenomenal shape at 300 pounds. You can move him all around the line. So I think you put him with Poona Ford, their defensive end. You've got Carlos Dunlap. Kerry Hyder's very underrated. I like that offseason signing. They've got Alton Robinson coming back. Darrell Taylor's going to be playing the Sam linebacker position, which is very intriguing because of his pass rushing ability. Just a really good athlete, can drop back in coverage, a lot like Bruce Irvin was for the Seahawks for a number of years. So I think that front line is nasty. The linebacking group, Jordan Brooks has a chance to be a breakout player in year 2. Bobby Wagner is still Bobby Wagner. And really, to me, the only question mark of this defense is that cornerback group. But there's still a chance that could be a really good group. Akella Witherspoon ended the 2020 season playing phenomenal football the last three games. He's just been so inconsistent, but he's got that long frame, 6'3", big or long arms, a really athletic corner, ball hawking skills. So he fits what they're looking for. And DJ Reed was great in the second half last year. Pierre Desir's looked good so far coming back to Seattle. He's had a track record of being a good starter at one point. So they've got some intriguing guys. I just don't know that they've got a sure thing there. So that would be my one concern. The safeties, Jamal Adams is obviously a great player. And I think Quandre Diggs is one of the most underrated safeties in the entire game. So this defense really started to click in the second half when they got Dunlap, and more importantly, when Jamal Adams came back from his groin injury and he got more comfortable in the defense. I think some of the pieces they've added, the wild card is Alden Smith. If he's able to play with the other defensive linemen they've got, if I'm another quarterback in another team, I'm getting a little bit scared going into these games because they've got a lot of depth and a lot of unique types of pass rushers on the outside and on the inside on that D-line.
Yeah, and apparently at safety too, where you're getting all those sacks out of Jamal Adams, right? It's coming from everywhere. Once again, y'all, you can follow Corbin at Corbin Smith NFL. I catch him every day over on Locked On Seahawks. Corbin, before we get you out of here, I want to ask you. Usually we ask questions about players that are currently on the team. I actually want to ask about somebody that's presently a free agent, linebacker KJ Wright. Yeah. What would a team that signs him end up getting out of this player that might be on they call it the wrong wrong side of 30, but he's on the other side of 30, but he's still, I think, a very talented player. What would a team get with a guy like KJ Wright? And is there any, interest, or do you think there would be any interest at all in a reunion with the Seahawks?
So I don't think the door has been closed yet on him coming back to Seattle, but I think it's almost shut. That's my personal opinion. I just mentioned a few minutes ago Darrell Taylor. He didn't play last year, coming back from leg surgery. That was a huge disappointment for the Seahawks, but he's been doing that hybrid role all offseason where he's rushing some as a defensive end, but he's around 250 pounds. They're hoping to get him back up to around 260. Sure. But he can play that Sam linebacker spot easily. He's got the athleticism. He played some linebacker at Tennessee in college. They like him a lot at that position. And KJ Wright, as great of a player as he's been, and last year I will argue was the best year of his career. That's what I would say for other teams looking for linebacker help. He's a fantastic player still. He is not a pass rushing presence, though. That he's just not going to be a guy that can pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. Darrell Taylor is exactly that. That's probably the best attribute in his game is his burst upfield, his ability to turn the corner on tackles. So he brings a dimension to that Sam linebacker spot that KJ Wright simply does. Now, on the flip side, I'm hesitant about Darrell Taylor, how he's going to fit there from a run defense standpoint. KJ Wright, when he moved over there early last season to replace Bruce Irvin, he was just a monster setting the edge. And he's got those long arms. He's a physical player. He's as smart of a linebacker as you're going to find in the league. Good luck trying to run jet sweeps over there. And even last year, he had to play on Kyler Murray. KJ Wright has never been a great athlete for the position. But Kyler Murray's running read option, and he smoked him about 3 yards in the backfield. You just don't see linebackers off the edge doing that, especially a guy that doesn't have great athletic tools. But KJ Wright gets the job done. And so that would be my one concern for Seattle. You're losing that ability there. And if you can't set the edge, then it really impacts all facets of your defense.
Sure.
So he's a fantastic leader in the locker room and on the field, outstanding in the community, and he's a darn good football player. Only player in the league last year with double-digit tackles for loss and double-digit passes defense. So, again, he to me had his best season of his career. But I understand Seattle's perspective, too. They want to get Darrell Taylor in the field. I mentioned all the depth they have at defensive end. He's not going to get a lot of snaps there. So I think this is a perfect scenario to be able to get him on the field, and he's got the ability to drop back in coverage. They've also got Cody Barton there who they think could play that position if Taylor somehow doesn't pan out or training camp's a struggle for him. I don't expect that. So I don't think it's ruled out, but I think he's probably playing for another team just because it's not even money. Seattle has the cap space, I think, to re-sign him. They just they want to go young. They've got Jordan Brooks and they've got Darrell Taylor, and they want those guys getting reps. So
yeah, absolutely. Corbin, we appreciate you so much for taking the time to come through. Make sure you catch Corbin and Rob over at Locked on Seahawks. You can follow Corbin on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. We appreciate you coming through, buddy.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate jumping on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Corbin.
See you soon.
Seahawks are one of those teams, man, that I just have a lot of questions about. We know that everything is fine. I mean, obviously the press conference this week with Russell Wilson, and he's like, we're still friends, with obviously Pete Carroll. But, I think at the end of the day, when you look at the NFC West and you look at Russ's concerns over the years of not really surrounding him, not giving him some input, I think, how long is that going to keep him? He's happy now, but how long is he going to stay happy?
Right.
And also, when you factor in, I think everybody else in the NFC West, they also got better. I don't know where Seattle currently stands right now in combination with the other teams, because the real offseason turmoil for them was, what's the latest with Russell Wilson? Is Russ on his way out? I mean, that's been the big distracting factor there. But defensively, they have a lot of, they need to improve a lot. When you're giving up, the amount of yards that you're giving up per game. And I was just really disappointed in that wild card appearance against the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, they didn't, coming into that game, Jared Goff was never supposed to play. And so, unfortunately, their quarterback gets knocked out. Jared Goff comes in, and they still struggle. And that was really odd because Jared Goff could barely throw the football. So, I don't know. The Seahawks are still one of those teams that they have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, but I worry about whether or not their defense can stop anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And, look, I'm sure that we gave Corbin a little bit of a break not asking about Russell Wilson, right? But Russell Wilson is still very much going to dominate the way that people talk about this team, because people will start to look ahead to next offseason. People will wonder, just like you mentioned, are they going to be able to keep him happy over the course of the regular season? And does that cause any turmoil as the season progresses and as the season deepens? I think all of that is still very much valid, and all that is very much present. It's still a dominating storyline and something that could potentially dominate and even, I would say, dictate the way that your season ends up going as a franchise. And you mentioned some of the improved teams in the division. I think you can maybe argue a little bit about which team is most improved, but I kind of know where my vote goes when it goes to the NFC West in terms of the most improved teams that are there. And maybe you take into account the last couple of years as opposed to just this offseason, because there's still things we need to see. But when it comes down to it, I'm really excited about the Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West. To help us talk about all of the excitement around the Cardinals, we're going to welcome in our guys, Brack and Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals. You can catch them every Monday through Friday, not only on your favorite podcast provider, but also on YouTube as well. The Locked On Cardinals YouTube page is live, and you can follow Bo on Twitter at Brack, and you can follow Alex on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming through. How are you today?
What's up, guys?
Doing great, man.
Very glad to have you both here with us. Y'all had a fantastic conversation over on Locked On Cardinals this past week. We were talking about this team being as exciting as they are. Kyler Murray, extremely exciting. Talk to his longtime trainer. What are some of the things that you took away from that conversation?
It's really funny because Kyler Murray, everybody wants to hear from the kid, right? He's just this incredible athlete, but he's very reserved. He's very quiet. Mm-hmm. He's kind of an introvert. He's not like us. He doesn't like to talk in front of a microphone on a daily basis. So Stephen Baca is his longtime friend and trainer, and he loves to talk. And he told us things that we didn't know about Kyler Murray and things that gave us confidence that, there's been rumblings. There's been just rampant speculation about, what his transition from year 2 to year 3 has been. And it's got to have every Cardinals fan who's listened to it. And if they haven't, I encourage them to check them out on our YouTube page or our podcast. Listen to Steven just talk about how he's putting in the work, about how Kyler Murray, he breathes the NFL. He breathes competition. It's either he's playing video games, he's working out, or, he's not doing anything else. So it's got to have you hyped that Kyler Murray, a guy who had 37 total touchdowns in his second season, is going to continue to make the jump and could be in that Josh Allen, area next season, which is just exciting. He was in the MVP conversation last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to throw something interesting at you guys as well, because I saw something, I don't know where it was. It was about a week and a half ago, but there was a possibility about this baseball talk with Kyler Murray. Now, it's not off the table yet. Can you address those concerns with Cardinals fans? I know you probably have already done it on the Locked On Cardinals podcast, but for anybody that's watching this and maybe missed out on that, is there a reason to be concerned about Kyler maybe pursuing a career in baseball if something doesn't work out in the football realm? Because this is a big year for him and Cliff Kingsbury.
That's a very interesting way of asking it. Should there be any concern? Because let me tell you why. So Bo and I talked about this, and Kyler Murray's first love was baseball. This is how I equate it to. If you heard it on the podcast, apologies. That was his high school girlfriend. Okay. Right. Baseball was. And then this college girl that he didn't even know women could be this beautiful came into his life. He's like, sorry, high school girlfriend. I'm going to go into the bright lights of football now. And then now he's thinking, man, I really loved my high school girlfriend. So it's kind of this thing where it's just an existential situation for him where it's like, he's a baseball player by personality. Yeah. Like, he's quiet, he's reserved. Right, sure. He's a baseball player by personality. He's not an NFL quarterback by personality. There's no wrong personality to have. But I asked Bo this, if you just take away his picture, his height, his weight, whatever, and you put his attributes down on a piece of paper, and you ask baseball or football, you say, oh, baseball, which is like the weirdest. It's just a weird situation to put into this where, no, there's no way in hell he's going to go play baseball right now, at least. Unless the Diamondbacks somehow get his rights and, you get weird in the same city. But no, it's not concerning. It's just fun to hear him talk about baseball. Yeah. Because that he loved it maybe more than he let on, because he's been this all-world star since he came into the league.
But how is it the one that got away?
Yeah.
Really. But when you kind of put everything down on paper and you realize, franchise quarterback money is, you're not going to go ride a bus in the minor leagues
Right.
When you're going to make upwards of $40 million in 2 years, like Kyler Murray's going to do a season. I mean, it's not worth it. He's going to have to take his lumps and go play in the minor leagues. Like, no Major League Baseball team is going to be taken seriously if they just say, hey, Kyler, we're going to give you a starting role. You're going to come over here and you're going to play. No, he's got to take his lumps in the minor leagues. Why would you do that? Why would you give up the life of a franchise quarterback and the type of money that they're going to make, the guaranteed dollars, to go ride a bus? Nobody's going to do that. And I don't care if it's the Diamondbacks that get his rights or if Oakland moves to Vegas, which could be a reality at some point, which is closer to Arizona. It's not going to happen anytime soon, if ever.
He's going to be, I can tell you this. He'll be better than Tim Tebow as a baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And quarterback.
He'll be better than Tim Tebow as a tight end, too, if you want to give him a shot.
We need to see that happen.
Oh, I love it. Guys, one of the other things I wanted to ask a little bit about is this new linebacker tandem in town for the Arizona Cardinals. Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Kime or if it was somebody else that referred to them as the most beautiful linebacker duo in the NFL. Was it Cliff? Yeah. Most beautiful linebacker duo in the NFL. What do fans need to know about the most beautiful linebacker duo in the NFL when it comes to these guys?
I mean, it's never happened before in the NFL history. These guys are tall, they're bigger, and they're inside linebackers. You know, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Now, that's not to say it won't work. We saw Bo brought up a really, really funny point this past week on the podcast where Isaiah Simmons has some Bobby Boucher in him.
I love it so much. Oh my god!
And it's just like when he said it, I'm like, sweet mother, he's right. Like, and the one hit that popped in my head was the hit that cost the Cardinals the game against the Patriots, where he just threw Cam Newton out of bounds, and it was called a late hit. And Cam Newton went parallel to the ground like Bobby Boucher would hit somebody. Zaven Collins is the question mark, really, because he's bigger than Isaiah Simmons. And Bo says he's beefy. That's it. That's example Bo uses. I mean, we just don't see this size players. Yeah, we don't see these size players playing inside. Right. So this is Kime's job if it doesn't work this year. And it's beautiful, maybe. I would love to see it work. We just haven't one time seen this happen in NFL history. So that's where the interesting part lies.
Yeah, Zaven Collins, 6'4", 260 throughout the draft process. We'll see what his actual playing weight is, but he's got a couple of C's in that thickness, that's for certain. So is he somebody that you are going to see them maybe rotate in to be a pass rusher every now and then, or is the focus for him specifically going to be inside?
He's going to be the Mike linebacker. He's already been tabbed. They're starting Mike, and it looks like you'll probably get a little mo from Isaiah Simmons, who only played about 35% of the snaps last year.
Right,
yeah. That snap count's going way up for both of these guys. I mean,
should be.
And Kai, I mean, you've invested back-to-back first-round picks. You did back-to-back first-round picks in the quarterback position. You finally got it right with Kyler Murray, not Josh Rosen. And now they're trying to get it right with the linebacker position. And it's not a position that, like the inside linebacker, people would criticize organizations that utilize those first on that position because you think you can find it later in the draft. You can find it on the free agent market. But, man, if it does work, Ross, as he said, Cliff Kingsbury says they're the prettiest linebacker duo probably in the league. But if they can put it together, that's the biggest if. Can they get enough playing time to make an impact and then not have those like young player mistakes be made in a very tough division where the stakes are very high for this Cardinals team? That's going to be huge for both Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, and real quick, just to piggyback on that, what we saw from Hassan Reddick in his plight over the last 4 years before he left was he was underutilized the first 3 years playing inside linebacker. Then they let the kid eat on the outside last year, and he got a contract somewhere else. If Steve Keim can learn from that, and as you mentioned, move Isaiah Simmons potentially to the outside with how much of a mauler he is, they may be able to kind of trim the fat on waiting a couple of years before letting Isaiah Simmons potentially play in his natural position of go see quarterback, hit quarterback. I mean, if they could do that early, it may expedite the process a little bit for these guys.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you guys something
last year. It's crazy.
6. Well, so that interesting because in Vance Joseph's defense too, Justin Simmons had to learn corner, nickel, safety because the Broncos were just. I don't know. Do you feel like that's going to get a guy that overthink too much? I mean, that's a possibility. But I wanted to ask you about something. I had the opportunity to have a question answered somehow on the Flying Coach podcast with Sean McVay, Peter Schrager, and it was the episode with Cliff Kingsbury. I don't know if you guys had a chance to hear it. Did you guys hear it yet?
I heard
Okay.
bits and
Bits
pieces.
and piece of it. Yeah.
The funny story about, Cliff Kingsbury needing an extra sideline pass for one of his Instagram model friends. I mean, that is the story. I mean, if you want to know a little bit more about the Cardinals head coach, we're talking about guys who, he's saying, hey, we have the most beautiful linebacking duo. Cliff Kingsbury, man, he cracks me up. So you got to go back and listen to that interview. That was a great insight into Cliff from Sean McVay.
He's got the
That's
slow
too good.
jams voice too.
He really does. He really does.
you
Like he could
wish-
podcast if he wanted to. He really could.
K2 though, you wish he would be more of himself, because I feel like the players get a sense of who he is, but the media, the fan base, at some point he's starting to he buttoned it up, and he needs to loosen up a little bit, but the pressure's on. This is make or break for Cliff. It's easy to go from 3 wins to 5 wins, and then 5 wins to 8 wins. This is where we're going to find out a lot about K2.
But yeah, Cody, I heard that part, and it's out of like a real world road rules challenge where these guys know each other for a long time and they're doing little backdoor deals. Like Sean McVay, so pretty much he asked Sean McVay for a field pass day of, texting him day of, hey man, what's up? Hey, I don't talk to other coaches on game day. Hey, I need a field pass for my lady friend. Like how we know a couple of things about Cliff Kingsbury. 1, he hasn't had a carb since 1997. And then 2, he loves his Instagram models. I mean, that's pretty much it. And 3, he can coach a little bit.
Oh, man, that's going to be a great autobiography one day.
Oh yeah. Well, wait. Autobiography for Cliff or the Instagram model? Because I'd be curious to hear both. Honestly,
Might be both, honestly.
A lot of anecdotes.
I'd be very curious.
There's going to be a reality TV show coming up with Cliff. I guarantee it.
Just give me the
Kicking
30
it with
to
Cliff.
30.
Kicking it with Cliff.
There it is.
It's going to be a thing. Guys, we appreciate it as always. You guys taking the time to join us. Y'all are absolute regulars here for the Sunday show, and we really appreciate you always being willing to take the time to join us. As you saw in the chat here, we're not the only ones that believe that the Cardinals are going to be better than folks expect. So you're getting some love from fan bases as well. This is a Saints fan that's saying this, by the way, my good friend at Expat Adventure on Twitter. But guys, we appreciate you so much for taking the time. Remember, you can find these gentlemen on Locked On Cardinals on your favorite podcast provider, as well as over on YouTube as well. You can follow at Bo Brack at Clancy's Corner as well. And of course, you can catch Bo on Mondays over on the Locked On NFL podcast as well. Guys, we appreciate you coming through and for being with us here again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Boom. Man, I always love watching those two on YouTube, man. They're funny, especially when you interact with them in the comment section. Obviously the Phoenix Suns, they're playing in game 1 of the Western Conference Finals against the Clippers today. I know
That's right. It's gonna be big.
Alex and Bo, they got their eye on that. No Chris Paul. But you know what? They're going to call up the guy from Denver who said Suns in 4. He's got the hands. He might be able to throw some
He's
pieces at him.
got the hands. He's got the hands for certain. Cody, before we wrap up, we always like to do final thoughts here on the show. I thought it'd be fun real quick to run through our Locked On NFL top 10 quarterback list. This hasn't been published yet, but we'll be able to talk about it a little bit, give folks a bit of a sneak peek. So let's run through this list. You want to go from 10 to 1 real quick?
Yeah, we should do that.
Way?
10 to 1, I think, will generate some interesting conversation here in the comment section. So,
absolutely. So feel free as you're watching along. We're going to be wrapping up here with today's show with our Locked On NFL, as voted on by the Locked On NFL local experts, top 10 quarterback list. Feel free to chime in as we move along here. So let's start with 10 through 6. 10 being Ryan Tannehill, getting 2.4% of the vote. So we see a big discrepancy between number 1 and number 10, and then we have a bunch of kind of like received 1 votes, things like that. But Ryan Tannehill at number 10. We've got Matthew Stafford at number 9. Dak Prescott at 8. Lamar Jackson at 7. And Deshaun Watson at 6. Anybody stand out for you at the bottom of that list?
I mean, I would say a little interesting that Stafford's there at 9. Just a little interesting, when you talk about he and Kirk Cousins. I mean, even though I crap on Kirk Cousins a lot, that's an interesting one. And we'll see. I mean, obviously with the change in offensive scheme, he's going to be hanging out with his buddy McVay, but I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, that was probably the interesting one that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think it's the other one that's really interesting to me too is Ryan Tannehill. I mean, we talk a little bit about Ryan Tannehill pretty often here on the show, and of course now he has this brand new weapon in Julio Jones. I kind of wonder how much of the voting might have been affected with the potential. This was before the trade happened, but how many people maybe projected forward that, hey, the Titans are really in on this, as most of us knew. if he gets Julio Jones and all of a sudden he raises up, or if, people really look at it this way. I know our good friend Joe Marino over at Locked On Bills, as well as Draft Dudes, is, very much on the Ryan Tannehill benefits from play action group, which I kind of am too, which I think is hard to deny when it comes to Tannehill, but he's still a talented quarterback because you still have to be able to take advantage of that either way. But there's an interesting name that's missing from this list. So let's roll along here through 5 through 1, or is there another one that stands out from 6 through 10 for you?
Well, obviously, taking a look at the Deshaun Watson situation, his football he played last year was impeccable from that positional standpoint, but obviously there's going to be a little bit of a placehold on maybe his thoughts or projections in 2021. I don't think he's going to play. I think he'll be on the commissioner's exemption list, but obviously that whole situation has to sort out. But, I really think 5 through 1 is actually, I think, pretty accurate at this point in time.
I think I agree with that. And real quick, just to mention, if Deshaun Watson doesn't play in 2021 or removed him from this list, it would move Matt Ryan in at number 10, basically. It wouldn't move him in any higher than that, but it would get Matt Ryan into the top 10. Yeah. He's the one that I think is really interesting that's missing from this list. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that he's not in the top 5, because I don't think anybody would expect that outside of maybe Falcons.
Top 10, though, absolutely. I think that's strong consideration for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's hit 5 through 1 here as we wrap up. We've got number 5, Josh Allen out of Buffalo. Number 4, Tom Brady. And then 3 through 1 being Russell Wilson at 3, Aaron Rodgers at 2, Patrick Mahomes at 1. I don't have much beef at all with the top 5 here.
Not at all. I think that's a pretty accurate one. Obviously, there's going to be some Tom Brady fans who will be like, no, Brady's number 1. Look, what Brady did last year was very impressive, going to a new team first year, taking them, to a Super Bowl and winning it. Absolutely nothing there. Josh Allen's rise was really incredible. I think, if he can maintain that, he'll probably stay in that top 5 category. Russell Wilson was playing some damn good football last year, so I can't discount where he's at. 3, Aaron Rodgers, obviously MVP season. I think between he and Patrick Mahomes, it could be a coin flip between those two. They're probably the top 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL, and maybe both of them will be in the AFC West.
Yeah, right. We'll see how it all goes, right? Maybe they end up being like the Drew Brees, Tom Brady of the NFC South last year, with both of them being in the same division. Then you get Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes in the same division next year. We'll see how it all pans out. Shout out to Patrick Mahomes for joining the Madden cover with Tom Brady this year, the GOAT and the baby GOAT. That was pretty cool to see. But I completely agree with you. I don't have really any beef at all with the top 5 here. I love seeing Josh Allen in the top 5. I think he absolutely deserves it. He had a big time ascension last year. I'm really interested to see if he can, take another step forward in 2021, what he's able to do there. And if he does that, that would put him in MVP conversation if he takes another step up from where he was last year, just based upon how successful his last season was. But now you look at some of the weapons that he has around him. He has a full year now of experience with Stephon Diggs and an actual offseason to install an offense together. I think Josh Allen has the potential to maybe take another step forward, and I'd be very excited to see that.
Yeah, Buffalo, they brought everybody back. Everybody was willing to take discounts to come back. So, look, I think for them, do I see anybody? Do I see Miami competing for them for the division? I don't know. I think a lot of that rests on how Tua plays. But Josh Allen, obviously firmly in command last year. A disappointing end of the season for them for sure, but they have so much damn talent, and his arm talent alone and his ability to run. He is a dynamic weapon, and for him, as he gets more comfortable, obviously we saw him take that massive jump last year. Right. He's going to be even more comfortable this year. He has the opportunity to do even more. So I think that's obviously a great place to kind of be if you're Josh Allen. Especially, he can rise up this chart really quickly too. So
yeah. Absolutely. Some of the other quarterbacks that got votes, Justin Herbert, the offensive rookie of the year last year, Kyler Murray, who is, of course, the Cardinals, guys that we were just talking with. Matt Ryan, as we mentioned, was just outside of the top 10 if Deshaun Watson isn't on this list, or if Aaron Rodgers isn't on this list. Both, if one or the other ends up not playing in 2021 for whatever reason, then Matt Ryan would move up into that. Ben Roethlisberger got some votes. Ryan Fitzpatrick got some votes. And interestingly, we did see Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz both getting votes as well, but both of them pretty far toward the bottom there. So not really a lot of consideration. How the hell is
Ryan Fitzpatrick above Kirk Cousins?
He ended up getting more votes in like the the 8-9 range, whereas Kirk Cousins got more votes in the 9-10 range, if that makes sense. Ryan Fitzpatrick got mentioned earlier in the voting, so that was one of the reasons why he ends up, that carried more weight.
Yeah, I was going to say, even like a surprise in my opinion, Baker Mayfield, I'm surprised he's not maybe in consideration for the top 10. I think what he did last season, he's got top 10 quarterback traits, and he played like a top 10 quarterback last season. So can he build on that? I know this is another big year, but I think having consistency at OC, I think with Stefanski coming back is going to be great. He did a really great job of transforming that offense and also helping Baker Mayfield elevate. So I don't know. Keep an eye on Baker Mayfield once we do this list maybe in 2022.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield's highest vote was 8th place.
Ooh,
that was his highest vote. He didn't get any 1 through 7 votes. So
interesting, for sure. I mean, and all this voting too, ladies and gentlemen, like Ross mentioned, was conducted by the Locked On NFL staff. All of us collectively around the 32 teams that we cover, plus the additional other podcasts like the Peacock and Williamson Show. You can get on your favorite podcasting platform as well. So. Yeah, interesting. Quarterback's always going to be an interesting conversation in the debates, but we're eager for fans' thoughts as well. If you're in the comment section, this is going to go up on YouTube as well. Let us know, and make sure you hit the subscribe button on the Locked On NFL YouTube page, where you're going to get daily video content as well, alongside here Locked On NFL Sunday.
Absolutely. So, y'all, that's going to wrap it up for today. We'll have top 10 running backs will be our next big vote here across. So if you have any thoughts on top 10 running backs as well as top 10 quarterbacks, leave them in the comment section below on YouTube. We appreciate you as always for coming through and joining us for another episode of Locked On NFL Sunday. That's Cody Roark at Cody Roark NFL. You can catch him every Monday through Friday over at Locked On Broncos. And I am Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson NOLA, Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Cody, take us home, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday, especially here on Father's Day, to listen to Ross and I and our local experts talk football. Just a reminder, I'm going to be gone the next 2 weeks. I'm going on vacation, so Ross is going to have some special guests filling in, but you can catch us next Sunday for a brand new episode, Locked On NFL Sunday Live, where you get your football talk.